Welcome back to Design for Impact. Today we're going to be talking about facilitating an inclusive conversation, and it's going to be more, as usual, it's going to be more of a discussion. We want to hear from each other about what techniques and tactics you've used and applied and how you found them. So story time. One time I was presenting to an exec. We were coming up with a strategy for basically like emergency services, and this emergency services includes things like fire and emergency and jail and lots of different components. And we had a ton of interviews talking to lots of people from the different areas, including the court system. And then we needed to come up with a one pager, and we came up with all these different options. And there was supposed to be a more senior designer with me, like this professor, and he was supposed to come and present it to them and get their feedback. And then what ended up happening is he couldn't come to Canberra, so he said, okay, I'll dial in. And then so we said, yeah, that's cool, we'll just make sure the systems are set up and stuff. It was before the days of Zoom, so it was all like Skype and things like that. And then we got to the day, and I remember I had another designer with me, and we were going in person, and then this senior designer was coming like through teleconferencing. And then we walk into the room, the exec have just finished the meeting, they're all smiling and stuff, and then they realize that the guy can't connect in. And so it's left up to me to present this thing, and I'm like, I literally haven't prepared, thinking the guy is going to present it and I'm just going to be there to like capture their feedback. And then they say, okay, that's all right, Abram can just present it. And I was like, yeah, of course, no worries. And then I remember standing there and then showing them the different options, and every time I would present an option, they would have like things that they don't like about it. And so at the time, the power was, or the dynamic was like, here's Abram presenting something, and then people's job is to criticize it or critique it. And so for me, it was like a bit uncomfortable, because I felt like everything I would share they would like some things, but a lot of things they wouldn't like, and it wouldn't sit. So what I ended up doing, because I had almost like seen it in practice so many times, was I needed to shift the dynamic. I needed to shift the dynamic from, here's Abram presenting and your role is to critique it. I shifted the dynamic from that to, okay, let's come up with something together. And then I said, okay, let's look at the options and see what we like from them, write those down and reflect them on the whiteboard, and then talk about what's missing and what could we improve and things like that. And the session ended up being really helpful, all because I managed to change that dynamic. And so that's the similar concept, like when we talk about inclusive conversations, right? I think the big difference between a successful and unsuccessful workshop. A successful workshop has a dynamic where everyone feels included and can contribute. Whereas an unsuccessful workshop is where some people can contribute, but others really can't. And so it becomes this thing that sort of divides people, in terms of, maybe Dan says, oh, that was really awesome, the workshop was designed just how I like to contribute. But maybe Sachin says, that was really terrible, I didn't feel like I could contribute at all. So that's one of the stories. Does anyone have any similar stories about going from a weird sort of dynamic to one that's more inclusive and more helpful they wanted to share?
Yeah, I had a similar, it was a long time ago before I really facilitated much, but I was doing social work. I was working in a inner city high-risk youth program, and the group of social workers were coming in to do a learn for the day, just part of their program. They were coming in, and we prepared a presentation for them, me and my coworker at the time, and we had it up all on PowerPoint, and I don't know what it was, just PowerPoint completely failed the projector system, like the file was gone. And so we're there in front of all these social workers coming from University of Alberta, trying to give them this thing, and we're just in the basement of this youth unit, and we just started going, all right, we planned this whole thing out yesterday, we'll start talking. And it was really nice because we just started talking and trying to remember, and really just left it open a lot for questions. And what it ended up being was storytelling. It was really just them asking what the experience is for us, and we have had all these ridiculous, amazing, incredible, beautiful stories, the whole gamut from actually being there, and none of those stories were in the original presentation. It was all like, this is, they can get that logical PowerPoint information about what we do in our services and whatever on the website or in their school, but when it really comes down to it, they were very immediately intrigued by just asking us questions and us saying, oh yeah, like I had a knife pulled on me one time. Like that's what they want to hear and that's what they're going to remember. So that really, yeah, that changed the way I look at everything, and just having a conversation more than trying to teach something to social work students. I don't have any knowledge to teach them, but I have experiences to share.
That's cool. I really like that final quote. I don't have knowledge to teach them, but I have experiences to share. And that's, who was that guy, Dan, that you asked to come to teach us about storytelling? I forgot his name. Yeah, and that was like the one thing that I like, the big lesson, right? Don't just like list, here's what I've done, blah, blah, blah. Here's all my degrees, here's all my experiences. It's just tell a story, share a story about what your experience was like. It's interesting. Definitely with facilitation, I feel like because often people get nervous with it, especially if you're just starting, people have a tendency to over prepare and think, if people ask about this, I'll have a slide for it. If people ask about that, I'll have a slide for it. And sometimes it's actually more helpful to just take a step back and be more natural. Obviously, you need to do some preparation, right? You need to make sure that you know the stories that you might share, but yeah, having a slide for everything is not very helpful. Anyone else wanted to share their stories?
I took the Cynefin training maybe 2 months ago or so, and the way they trained it was basically, we're going to workshop through, here's what Cynefin is, and we'll pause for a little bit of like lecture in between to understand what we're doing. But it was interesting. I was the only designer in a group of 20 people. Everybody else were either like agile delivery leads, or they were process engineers, cybersecurity people. But one of the first exercises we did, day one, they had us read a couple articles on COVID vaccine distribution, and then they wanted us to identify the activity that was in those articles. So what were the results, the actions, the decisions, those sort of things, and then synthesize them in groups of 4. And I get in my group before, and all of a sudden everybody's in panic mode because they're like, I don't know, like synthesize to me, I do this all day long, but they're going, I don't understand what synthesize is. And they're doing the usual pass through the Zoom, meeting, the Zoom groups. And they said they have to explain this to everybody. So they pulled everybody back into the room and they said, we were very intentional about not giving any real direction here. You guys experience this. And so it's your interpretation of what synthesize means. We just want you to cluster what you think is relevant in a space. And I can't dictate what that is. So I'm going to leave it up to you to determine what that is. We got back in our groups, and then there was like this debate about, do we want to find things based on values? Do we want to define it geographically? There were some very sensory people in there that wanted to get aggressively analytical about it. And there were some of us that were just like, no, it looks like this was a thing that had a negative impact. This was a thing that had a positive impact. Like, we can do it whatever we want, but let's just come to some sort of agreement and then do that. And that will be our group interpretation of this. When we went back, there were a lot of people in my group that were nervous they had gotten it wrong. And they had to reinforce there's no right or wrong with this. The reason we're not giving direction is to what you're talking about, Badir, which is we don't want premature convergence, is what they described it as. We don't want our bias to direct the outcome of the activity. And so we're going to give you a very loose rule, and then we're going to back away and let you guys do the rest of the translating for yourselves. It was awesome. So that's like, I'm taking that to my next workshop all day long.
What was awesome about it, Kyle? What did you end up with that you feel like you couldn't have done if you had a more tight framing?
there was a lot more conversation within our group about what was essential and the ontology of each of those components. And part of the exercise, after all of that was done, after all that conversation, was we didn't use Miro, but we used something like Miro. It's something I've never seen before, but all like 6 groups are spread out across this thing. We took 10 minutes to explore the other groups and see how they interpreted the same exercise and how they clustered things, and all had our own like sort of aha moments. And then we got back in those groups and said, let's have a conversation about what other people did. And there were more aha moments of I was able to, without having a conversation, pick up the pattern that other people came up with. And so the sense making activity of, now I understand the group that I'm in and how they're deciphering the information that we're all experiencing together, was mind blowing. And what's interesting is when we went back, I said, okay, so how do I bring that into the office tomorrow? And they said, if you can actually, we like diverse groups for our workshops, but in this exercise, if you can segregate, you've got operations in a group doing their interpretation, and you've got risk over here, and you've got customer service over there, they're going to cluster their own way. And then when you synthesize broadly across all of those groups, you'll start to understand like what threads become common across your entire holistic space. And then you'll get some really good debate about like operations and customer service are totally segregated on this one thing. And all right, so that's where complexity starts to reveal itself. It's because we define that in completely different ways. Our ontology does not match up, our language. So we can step away from that and go, great, there's no black or white solution. And we can go down a very different path, as opposed to if we talk about something like a call center and how calls are moved through an IVR, operations and customer service might be very grounded on exactly how that works, and we can just table that and go, great, we're all aligned now.
Yeah, that's interesting about the point of framing something in a different way and it influences the outcome. That's, yeah, I found that really powerful. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so last week's challenge was to identify something that you would like to facilitate and then organize that so that a schedule of time to facilitate the conversation. Who managed to identify something and then schedule?
I scheduled something. We haven't had the talk.
Oh, good, because that's this week's challenge.
But just schedule? Oh, okay.
Yeah, just
Did my
schedule.
homework. Great. It's my partner's birthday tomorrow, and I was trying to look. I don't know if any of you have read or know the love languages, the 5 love languages.
Oh, yeah.
Her love language is just as words of affirmation. That's her top. And so I just organized, it's very simple, but I organized all of her friends that she invited to come celebrate, to just come up with a list of 5 things they love about her and why. And that's the conversation. I just did that secretly. And yeah, I just realized like getting cards and things even written down it's not quite like hitting the mark for what she would really want. And so it's very simple, but yeah, that's the conversation I'll facilitate.
That's great. Can you do that for me as well for my birthday?
Yeah, sounds great. That's what Design Your Life is going to be, just all affirmation.
You're going to pay to get affirmations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
no, that's awesome.
Man, are they going to be good?
That's a sick idea. I'm going to do that.
Right. All right. Design
I'll
your
remove this part of the recording so Marina doesn't know.
Is your wife, is Marina also words of affirmation?
Words of affirmation. Yeah. We read. I read. Marina doesn't like reading, so I read the 5 languages, the 5 love languages, and then told her about which ones, and then we sat together and tried to figure out like. It's interesting. It's definitely like a helpful framework because it's like, that's why that happened, or that's why I said this thing and it didn't flow so well.
Yeah, you guys got off easy. My wife is acts of service, so I feel like mow the lawn and all that shit.
Yeah, we can just say something. You actually have to do real work.
Honestly, It's not that words of affirmations is
Mm.
like maybe the lowest on my list. And so when understanding it, I realized she gives me words of affirmations all the time, and they just bounce off. And
Yeah.
if I'm not careful, honestly, I forget. It's not that I don't have it in me. I just,
Yeah.
but, yeah.
Yeah. That's
But yeah, I
interesting.
don't have to mow the lawn.
That's why we got synthetic lawn.
Awesome.
I saw this, I don't know, this video. I think Marina loves TikTok just for the funny videos. And she showed me this video the other day of this wife told her husband, we'll go to mum's house when you finish mowing the lawn. And so in order to mow the lawn, he got like the tiniest scissors and like just went one piece of grass by one piece of grass. Good idea.
That's perfect.
Or we can have a discussion of we're done with the beer and the guy gets a fork and he's.
That's definitely one way to drink your beer mindfully, though.
Yeah, really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, so the first thing we're going to be talking about is setting expectations. If you didn't do this last week's challenge, try to schedule a session for this week and then actually have the conversation. Be like Dan. Be more like Dan. Setting expectations. So I wanted to hear from you, like, how do you set and manage expectations and it might be personal life, professional life, whatever you want to share. And I will also paste the link of Miro. So if people feel more comfortable sharing it on there, that works as well. If anyone's struggling with Miro, just let me know. If you jump on, I can bring you to where the boards are for today. Session. So you can just click on me and you'll see the board. Tomorrow. Yeah, got it. So, all right, who's ready to share? All right, I'll give you a couple more minutes then. Okay. Someone ready to go? Who wants to share? Sashin, fire away.
Yeah. I think, how do we get people to work towards a common goal? Number one would be basically seek their help and support. Just in general, people love support. So when you go with that perspective, there's a good chance you'll be able to get it. And next is clearly explain the objective, exemplify the desired outcome, and have a story, if possible, of what the ideal outcome would be like.
That's super interesting. So I got two thoughts there. One is seeking the help. I think, like, you're absolutely right. When you give people the option of contributing to something versus telling them you have to contribute to this thing, I think they come with a completely different mindset. I think the other thing that reminds me of is like the idea of moments. So I remember listening to this talk about moments, and the person was saying, like, if you can identify what the moments are in the current state or in the current system that you don't want, and then how you want, like, in the future state, what you want those moments to become, that could like really help people to frame up like what it is that would need to change in order to be able to change those moments from what's happening today to what we want to happen in the future. I'll try to find the speech and post it on Slack. Cool. Who else wants to go? Kyle, do you want to go?
Yeah, mine's similar to what Sashin was just talking about. I'm really just getting to kind of what I was just talking about with what I learned from the Cynefin exercise is rallying around vague, real abstract outcomes. And I'm even really thinking about it in terms of, like, how can we express this without using words? Possibly just either images or storyboards that convey the experience. It was interesting. My son's 18 months now. We watch a lot of Pixar. He doesn't. We only turn the TV on for a couple hours a day, but when we do, it's usually Pixar. And there's a lot of goofy, fun Pixar stuff. But he loves watching it. He loves the music, like Coco and that kind of stuff. But there's this one short called Piper.
Oh.
It's like 7 minutes. And he laughed his ass off for 7 minutes straight. And there's no words in it. And like that was really powerful to me to realize like it's conveying message to basically someone that speaks an alien language. There's no other way to really put that. And that's what a lot of when I'm trying to design inclusively, I'm trying to bring people in from the most extreme margins that have very different perspectives on this, trying to write in language, here's what we want to produce, should not connect to everybody. So how do we abandon language and rally around the actual sort of the abstract idea of what we're trying to produce? And I think then backing away from that, you're going to find that people have their own intrinsic sort of needs, and you have to allow space for that. There's I'm going to post this to our Slack channel. I've been meaning to for a couple weeks now. There's this amazing keynote speaker from the Service Design Network who's talking about Fogo Island in Canada, in where's this, New Brunswick, whatever, one of the furthest islands out in Canada, out on the East Coast, where they basically built this brand new ecosystem because commercial fishing killed their proper ecosystem. And she has this amazing quote. She says, we're at our best when we find ourselves designing for the ands, and if we find ourselves in a position of ors, we have to go back and think a little bit harder. And so when you get a lot of people that have their own sort of intrinsic needs together, rallying around something very abstract as a final output, that's where I want to back away and let multiple things sort of propagate, and there would be more yes ands in that sort of situation than how do we dot vote on the one thing that's gonna stand out above the rest.
That's interesting. I like that you use the word propagate, because I've been thinking about like the language that you use in terms of we use in terms of complexity, and I use in specific in terms of being like less mechanistical and more natural. Yeah. Amazing. Dan, I see pure enthusiasm, and I feel like that's one of yours.
I would actually like some expert advice on that. I put that because that's just honesty. What I've used, I've been able to, in my experience, I get really excited about something, and it's a driver to motivate others, and specifically in youth work, like it's worked out where it's, yeah, I guess like that guy seems to have the plan and he says we should all do it. So yeah, sure, let's do it because he's silly and all sorts of things. And I've even found in doing design work and different things that I don't actually have a knowledge backing for that, but it seems to work. And I don't know how to like replicate that as something to share, except for just that. But I don't know what that means as a teaching tip, tool, helpful.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can't think of much. The only thing I can think of is our mood is contagious. So if we're excited about something, that might excite the other person about the same thing, type thing. But yeah, it's interesting. And I feel like it's very like person dependent. Like you're a very enthused person, whereas other people are like less so.
Yeah, I don't know how I guess it would be a whole process of extracting what exactly it is about enthusiasm and how to manufacture that within a leader. But yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Dan. Who else wants to share? Badr, do you want to share? Badr's like, oh no, I don't want to share. We can't hear you, by the way, if you're talking.
That he has to share. You have to share twice as much this week. That's what I was promised. So.
Oh, can anyone? Sorry, we can't hear you. You're unmuted, but it might be your mic settings, maybe.
No, I can't hear him either.
Good to know I'm not going deaf.
Mic might be off.
Can't hear you. We'll come back to you. Oh, you've already shared.
I ranted enough. This is I was talking about the rallying around the outcome.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Yeah, and having the abstract sort of propagating.
Yeah.
I have a memory of a goldfish. All right. Badr, we'll come back to you. So just let us know and just keep talking. And once you make a noise, I'll come back to you. I thought about like principles, right? In terms of if you're facilitating a workshop and like the things that are almost pretty basic, but a lot of people miss out on. So the first one I said, communicate frequently with the group. And I think that's super important because like Dan said earlier, you have a plan for the session and then that session goes very differently to how you envisioned it. So you almost need to have like almost planned touch-in points to say, okay, this is what we're going to do next. So that's what's going to happen next, especially if you're doing it virtual, because if you're breaking out people into spaces and stuff, the communication channels don't work so well as opposed to, you know, being in person. The second thing is, which I think is really important, is doing what you said you'd do, which is again, like super basic, but a lot of people discouraged or have different expectations because they expect you to do something and you didn't do it. And then I think that the important thing is it's not just about the session that you facilitate, but it's about what happens after the session as well, between that session and the next one, if there is a next one, or how do you reflect back what you heard? Yeah, now we can hear you.
Sorry.
That's all right. No, I just finished, so you're good.
Back to my first question. The first one before. I like what I learned from the negotiation. I went 20 years ago, when to have to find the same ground to understanding. A little bit what Kyle mentioned. Sometimes it's like a reverse pyramid, rather than go to the specific. If you try to talk about universally, you easily find a same understanding and common share rather than go into the specific. Like, take example, you are negotiating something related to children. If you are talking about dollar, the budget, the dollar, whatever, sometimes you will have this debate about money. But if you rather speak about children, it's like yes, indirectly it's related to children, but nobody will raise his hand and say, you know what, I have the possibility to do something to make the life of children better, and I am not doing it. You understand? It's like sometimes on the set you set expectation rather than go into the data, and intuitively we want to clarify. When you clarify, sometimes you may hit the wall because the outcome of whatever the outcome of the meeting may be different from one to other, and you are hitting this wall rather than going high level. And once everybody having this understanding, at this time you go back to another level rather than automatically go to the data. Sorry.
That's interesting. I love your like the visual language that you use, right? Because I'm thinking of like pyramid, and the thought that I had when you said pyramid is when we're designing like a conversation or we're facilitating a conversation, what usually happens is we start with people like sharing all their different views, and then we almost try to oversynthesize that to create something that makes sense. And I feel like Dave Snowden talks about this. We try to simplify complexity when we shouldn't be trying to simplify complexity, because we use a lot of like detail. And that's I think that's one thing that I'm really like learning to be fine with, because coming from a software engineering background, like I want like an answer, and it took a lot of time for me to be okay with the idea of having like lots of different perspectives on the same issue. And some of those are not like, or usually those experiences and things are not, they don't make sense when you put them together, which I think is like really interesting. Yeah. All right. So I went through my principles. So the second thing that we want to talk about is working towards a common goal, right? And I think some of us covered this while we were talking about like how do we manage expectations, aligning people on the same objective and things. But I want to hear stories in this one as well, and reflections about what worked and what didn't, because I think, yeah, anyway, I'll share more. But do people want a few minutes, or can they just go off the cuff?
I think we can freestyle.
All right, you start.
Oh, so many, because these always go wrong. Because I work in complex space and goals don't work in complex space. The number of times, I think one of my first big design projects, it was a sort of snowball design process of, okay, this is the problem that was escalated to us that we need to go fix. So now we've got the resources, we've got the okay, these are the customers, let's go release into the wild and start to research this further. So we cluster around those people, we frame the problem, we establish the goal for how we want to solve this. And in that, we also learn, oh, you still have to talk to these 2 other people. And then we talk to 2 more people and we realize, well, this is much more complicated. It's more complex. There's more factors that are part of this. And so now we're redefining our goal and our problem again. And that went on for the course of almost 2 years. Every time we included somebody new, or we got some sort of alignment on what we thought we were doing, somebody tripped over something and said, let's pivot to what is a bit more essential. And I think that's healthy. The problem I had was I was working in a space where it was, okay, build me your roadmap a year or 2 out and then present it up to senior leadership. And every time they wanted a status update, I was coming in and saying, I've got a new roadmap. And luckily I had somebody that was a bit adventuresome that kind of said, I think you're doing this right because you keep challenging the roadmap. But everybody else in the room that was also presenting their roadmap was looking at me saying, you're breaking everything. Like, this is a disaster. I'm going, no, this is what discovery is all about. This is what Agile is all about. If you guys want to practice Agile, what you say. And I think from that point on, I just realized that we were going to have to take this one step at a time, learn something, act the best you can, and then respond and then learn again and go through that cycle.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that story. I love that story because of a few things. I think you've brought in the idea of not having a specific objective that you're always working towards, like being flexible enough to learn and change the objective. And instead of just saying, we're here right now and we're going to go here in the space of 1 or 2 years, instead you're saying, okay, we're here now. The next thing we're going to do is this. And then you're still moving forward and demonstrating progress in terms of what you're learning and how that's influencing your approach. But at the same time, it's not pretending that there is a set path when there is no set path.
Yeah, my roadmap sort of turned into, the cone of possibilities, which I'm not very good at building those, but it became, based on what we learned, we can go a couple different ways, and asterisks on everything. We're going to learn something as we go through this. So forget everything, pencil everything that I've just told you, and wait for the next episode to figure out where we're projecting next.
Yeah, that's cool. It's like a TV series, and it's to be continued. I mean, who else wants to go?
I think my experience has been in the past is basically give people an idea about what the outcome is and give them examples of what is not needed, and then give them the metrics of measurement, be it quantity, be it time, the kind of content, the format of the content, and then roll forward with it. Frequent check-ins on the same.
Yeah, frequent check-ins are definitely. I remember seeing a tweet from, I think it was Thea Snow on Twitter, and she was saying they're working with this organization and they agreed that they wouldn't have set deliverables. They would decide on the deliverables based on what it is that they find out and figure is going to be most helpful. And that's amazing, but especially in with organizations that like really want to constrain something, it's like not a lot of organizations are happy for you to sort of say, we will deliver something helpful, we just don't know what it is yet. Yeah, they much prefer, this is the approach we're going to take, and this is what we're going to learn about, and then this is what we're going to give you. Yeah, which I don't think works in a complex system, but definitely a lot of the organizations I've worked with, that's the approach they need. That's the sort of level of certainty they crave. Who wants to go next?
I didn't have experience of kind, in the sense you are in a company that's open man to see what we trust, because at the end it's trust you. Just ensure that the optimum path you have discovered today may be different tomorrow, but we understand. I come from a more military organization where it's like a project management, the scope, what is in a scope, out of scope. And most of the time when you are in data warehouse projects, it is, and the company is an old company, it's layout on top of layout, on top of the layout, the systems. And you are coming now to say, okay, I want to create a data warehouse. Each time you come to build a roadmap, you discover that and the problem is, if people are not accepting that you may come up to change the deliverable, if you stay with the first deliverable, you end up with a huge roadmap, and you don't know where to start, because you commit yourself that you will deliver this in and out, you will deliver a data warehouse. Sometimes when you are not in flexible, in a situation where people are flexible with the outcome, you are stuck with with the budget and finance, and you have to deliver it, and you know that you cannot deliver it because you have the information that you have today is not what you had yesterday, and you end up having this loop. And at the end, most of the time, a lot of companies, they don't end up building this data warehouse because they have a huge roadmap, and if they want to deliver what they committed at the beginning, it will cost, and that is just to say, it's the same cost. We take the loss and we stop the project. Most of the time, that's my reality. It's like 2-3 times this kind of scenario that I did most.
Yeah, cool. We've like overcommitted to a long-term objective that we've realized now that we can't really deliver on, or is not even helpful to deliver. Anyone else? All right. So I was thinking about reflecting on my experiences, and I was thinking there's almost like 2 types of like approaches, right? Extreme ends of the spectrum. One is like telling people what the goal is, and then asking, okay, how are you going to deliver this? How are you going to deliver your part of the bigger picture? And then the other one is sharing the constraints in terms of, here's the sort of like field that we can play in, right? Now, what's already important? What's important for people? And like Kyle said, it's almost like creating a herb garden, because you let everyone plant like the seeds that they like. And then all of a sudden you've got like plants that serve, or an objective that serves the needs of everyone, or something to work towards that serves everyone. But you couldn't have, without asking them, you can't like guess, right, what plants people need. Does that make sense? Like, Dan might need basil, and Kyle, you might need mint, and Sashini, you might need a bit of parsley and a bit of coriander. Without asking you what it is that you need, or what it is that we want to aim towards, I can't figure out that is what you need. And I was thinking, like, why? Like, why is that sort of like a more effective approach? And I think typical scientific management says we need to set the goal and then tell our employees or subordinates or whatever to deliver this part, and we'll have a work breakdown structure to say, here's the individual components, and if we put them together, it will just magically be like a puzzle and we'll achieve the objective. But I think why this approach is better is, the first thing is that it gets buy-in, right? Without asking people what it is that they want to, what the problems are that they want to solve for, we're almost like belittling their experience. So the first thing is that it gets buy-in. The second thing is when it gets buy-in, right? If I say I'm going to do something, right? If I say I'm going to do, we're going to do, or I'm going to, you know, facilitate a session every week, then that holds me accountable just by the act of me saying I'm going to facilitate a session every week. Instead of say Dan telling me, Abram, why don't you facilitate a session this week and every week? And I'm like, yeah, okay. And then coming back and saying, I never really wanted that. It was actually Dan's idea. And then the second one, which I thought was, I need to put a cute picture of a dog, is to help them adopt the change as their own. If we're not solving people's problems and we're trying to get them to solve my view of the problem, then it's not really, it's not their baby. It's like when people are trying to fix something that exists in the system and how they experience the system, then it's much more likely that they do it if we give them the opportunity to share what it is that's not working. Does that make sense? Any reflections or challenges or thoughts?
Yeah, I like the idea of adopting the change as their own. I've been singing a lot about the benefits of sense making as being people that with access to new information make different decisions, lead to different outcomes, inherently change the nature of the system itself. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily need a plan or to really to design what that outcome is. All you need to do is give somebody access to new information, and that will just self-actualize. And I think because people are the most powerful catalyst for change in a system, that new information allows the system to catalyze.
Yeah, that's interesting. And allows people to identify what's important, right? Rather than presenting all the information, expecting them to act on all of it. It's, what do you think is important? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like propagating, right?
Yeah.
The change across the system. That's cool.
Exactly.
Any other thoughts? All right. So one of the principles I've applied is silence is disagreement, right? If you can't just, in the workshops I facilitate, you can't just sit back and sort of, you know, shrug your shoulders and pretend like you're saying that will work or I will deliver that part without actually saying I will deliver that part. So one of the things at the end of every session that I do is like saying, okay, here's what we agreed we need to do. Right now, I want people to say, I'm going to do this, and next week or the next session, I'm going to come and share back what I've learned or what we did and why it changed or whatever it is. And I think that act again of not just sitting and being passive, but almost like giving people the opportunity. And it is an opportunity because I think it's like, you can frame it as forcing people, but if forcing people, then you can't actually guarantee the change. Whereas if you get them to say, this is the bit that I'm going to do, and publicly announce that in front of the room, then they're much more likely to act on it. And I like it because it's like a different way of thinking, because usually people think silence is agreement. Yeah, but catches people by surprise. Sishin?
There was a book that I'm reading. It's by Chris Voss. It's about negotiation. And in that, he mentions this aspect that I think he mentions that in the silence, get them to disagree about something. And once you get people to disagree about something, you open them to agree about something. Because say something completely, obviously incorrect or irrelevant, and let them voice their negative on it, and that let them open up from silence.
Yeah, and I think some people, not everyone, but I think some people, in order to feel like they've contributed, they need something to disagree with. So it's like almost giving them that space to pick something to disagree with. It's not like saying, here's the thing, now disagree with it so we can get you to agree to the other thing. It's, you get to choose what to disagree with, and you get to choose what you agree with and sign up for.
Yeah. It's like leaving the one mistake in a document for someone to pick, because they're very nitpicky, and you want to give them that joy.
I really like that in terms of building safety and even in bringing connection in terms of something minor, something low stakes. Like if everyone can have a discussion and disagree on something that is, really low stakes and not that important, then it really opens that up and people can see, visually experience that it's okay to disagree, that it's going to be, it's all right. And so when it comes to a little bit later in the session, vocalizing a true disagreement on something that might be more contentious, then the safety has been built. I like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And there is one technique. There's a couple of techniques. I think Dave Snowden talks about one of, I forget what it's called, but it's getting someone to present something and then getting them to turn around and the people that they were presenting to like share, what it is that they like, how would they improve this idea? I think I don't really like the idea of turning away. I don't know why, maybe because I value like human connections, giving people the skills to be courageous to say something to someone's face. But one of the techniques that sometimes I use is De Bono's six hats. And there's like each thinking hat has like a different role. And almost like the black hat, for example, is very critical. It looks at risks. It wants to like point out risks with the purpose of overcoming them, not just of the purpose of pointing out risks. And what that gives is, like Dan said, it gives people the license to say, I've got the black hat on. It's my role to poke holes in what it is that you're saying, versus I've got another hat on and it's my role to do X, Y, and Z. And I find that sort of, because you get a group of people to agree that's what the person's role is, then they can accept what it is that they're saying, because they understand that that's the perspective they need to have on, as opposed to thinking, why is this person difficult? What happened today for them before the workshop?
I was just going through a document which had that, and I was at that page about an hour ago, and I've never heard of it. So this is the second time in my life that I heard of it in a matter of a couple of hours.
It's meant to be, Sachin. Which hat would you choose? Which hat would you choose? What was your favorite hat?
For me, I would say green would be most appropriate. Was creativity, fantasy, spontaneity, intuition.
Looking at like, how can we evolve this idea?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the red hat, which is the emotional instinct. The person with this hat articulates the emotion with the problem in the project. And
we can talk about that, but have a look at it if you're interested in, like, how do you get a group of people to take on these or almost like synthetic roles, right, for the purposes of an next video exercise. Any other thoughts
about silence? Yes, thank you. Because for me, the disagreement is not an issue. A disagreement, when somebody, it's like playing poker. When somebody disagree, he play his card, where he stands, and now let's build the bridge. Let's find a way. It's silence that kills. I don't understand what is in your experience when you have members of the team that in silence, and you try to reach them, you try to, as you are doing today, it's like you are unsure that everybody's talking, you ensure that, yes, the discussion is moving on, but ensure that everybody is participating. But sometimes still with this effort to push incentivize people to share their thought, they are still in silence. How you manage this kind of situation?
Yeah, that's a tough challenge. Any thoughts? I personally find that if it's the case that you've almost created an expectation for people to share their thoughts and they're still not willing, then I would say it's a much deeper problem that I think isn't, like, the right time to solve it isn't in the session. I think then it takes an individual conversation. So for example, it might be like psychological safety. So when I was like an early career designer, I kept getting a lot of comments like, why don't you talk in meetings? And for me, it was like, I've got these senior people right in the meeting that I don't want to say something that can be misconstrued or can appear wrong. And I think sometimes, to be fair, sometimes some leaders don't, like, I've attended workshops where if I say something, the facilitator will like look at me like, Why are you saying anything? Whereas I've been in other workshops where I know the facilitator wants me to share my perspective because they value it and they think it's different. So I think it's, if people are genuinely like almost like proactively taking a step back and not wanting to engage, then it almost like it's a symptom of a bigger problem that you need to address. And I think as a facilitator, you can do a lot of techniques to help people, and we can talk about this we're going to talk about this in a couple of minutes, to help people bring back people to the same level, regardless of what they represent outside of the room or virtual space. All right. So common challenges that so I think, Badr, you just shared a common challenge in terms of like silent people who just want to stay silent. What else do people face as common challenges? Because then we can talk and learn from each other.
That you do not have the time to do the due diligence, and you got to do it, and you do not have the right framework or the right framing and follow up and explaining and making sure everyone's on the same page, just because the resources are spread. And how do you get that time to make sure that everyone has an understanding before they get in? And how do you ensure that it won't go completely on a tangent because of some power struggle or something? Those are the challenges, essentially, are getting the harmony tuned in before you even have started that.
Yeah, absolutely. Time is definitely one of the problems that we keep hearing about over and over again, regardless of, regardless of the question. Any other thoughts? Dan?
Not having control over the ultimate goal. If it's not necessarily up to me, it's up to different stakeholders. I guess I notice it strongly. I'm coming from a place of a lot of youth work as being ultimately the person who is also giving the program and having ultimate control over that. So I've had a lot of trouble adjusting to this idea of, we're working towards this goal. I can't promise anything, and I can't say that the outcome is actually going to be the thing that we design together.
Yeah, right. So it's almost stuck in the middle between engaging people and then the people that actually make the decision in terms of what actually ends up happening. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very common. Any other thoughts, Kyle?
Yeah, I feel like applying what we know works and putting that up against company culture clashes often. And I'm going to lose when I'm fighting culture every single time. Trying to find that mix is not, I haven't been able to find that yet. So a little bit more specifically, when I'm bringing, I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, when I bring people into a workshop, they're not coming in to say, I'm humbly walking into this room to learn and be creative and share ideas in a white space and kind of kumbaya with everybody else around here. They are representing their organization and their objectives, and they have an idea and they're an expert and they're coming in to impose above all else. And then I've got 9 other people that are doing the same exact thing. And so I have to this is a 2-day ideation workshop, but day 1 is going to be let's just Royal Rumble and get all that transparent out on the table, put your objectives out there, fight over what you already know. And then once we move past that tomorrow, then hopefully we'll get to that spot. But it doesn't always work. You can't, I can usually, if I've got 10 people, I can shake 6 to 8 of them maybe. Mm-hmm. And the other ones are just going, I can't go back to my boss and tell them that I didn't activate the thing I told them that I would activate. I made a commitment. And I don't like any of the other ideas that I'm hearing. Mm-hmm. We can't just add more time onto this, like Shane was saying. So that's our company culture attacking us.
This sparked something in my head, and I don't know if this has been ever done. or if it is even advisable to do that, is if, let's say, there are 5 functional areas walking in, we tell each, let's say, functional area A, B, C, D, E. So for the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes, E will represent A, B will represent C, and D. Now put your thoughts in. I don't know if that is something that will be productive, or will it cause too much confusion. It's just something that came up in my head, and I was like, how would that, is there a practical example of someone having done that? Does it go completely disastrous, or does it help build empathy and productivity? I don't know. It's just something that came up in my head.
So I was never part of debate club when I was a kid, but my understanding is the first exercise is you establish your position, and then they tell you as soon as you get there, okay, now you're swapping positions. If you're really truly empathizing, you should be able to argue your opponent's point. And I love that idea. I think because it's a little bit more than just a dichotomy when we're doing this. That's why I'm favoring the sense-making space of, let's just get together and try and, like, the next workshop that I'm hoping to host is going to be more, let's map a system, and I'm going to get a bunch of people that don't agree with each other and how they understand the system, and they're going to have to not compromise, hopefully, but live in that space of ands, not ors, where they're putting what they know on a paper, and they're connecting the dots, and they're learning from each other, and they're debating to get to a truth, or they're realizing that multiple truths can coexist. And then when all that's done, they're walking away and saying, we're now aligned on what we know. So it's what you're saying, I think, where we now have a shared truth, but not necessarily like, ops, you have to be risk all of a sudden. Although I think if it was just the two of them, then that would be really interesting.
Yeah, that's why I was like, hey, so if there's 5 entities, would that be disastrous or productive? I don't know, but I hope someone has done an experiment. I'm fairly certain someone has. It'd be interesting to know what that is.
If you read McNamara, Robert McNamara's book, his 10 Lessons for Life, I think is what it is. The reason that we did not nuke this planet in 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis is because he and Khrushchev used to have dinner with each other, and he empathized with Khrushchev, and his number 1 lesson for life is empathize with your enemies. And that's by far like one of my favorite quotes, period. Basically,
who was that? Robert Kennedy?
It was Robert McNamara, who was the Secretary
of State. McNamara.
Yeah, under Kennedy. But he basically had to convince Kennedy that Khrushchev was going to be in a position where he either showed strength or weakness. And so by allowing him to show just a tiny bit more strength, if Kennedy backed down a little bit, then Khrushchev didn't want this either. He would be able to walk away and be okay. But if he showed weakness, they would just move him out of the Kremlin, and they'd replace him with somebody else with the expectation of viciousness and more. So.
Interesting.
Sorry about that. Coffee does weird things to me. What did you get to? What was discussed? Did you solve all the world's challenges? Yeah.
Yeah, you missed it.
Yeah,
Yeah, watch The Fog of War, which is, it's him basically narrating that book, and it's shot like documentary style, and Philip Glass is the soundtrack. It's brilliant.
What's this, Kyle?
It's a movie called The Fog of War. It's based on Robert McNamara's 10 Lessons for Life. But his first lesson is what we were talking about with the Cuban Missile Crisis. His first lesson is empathize with your enemies. And he talks about the example being how he avoided the Cuban Missile Crisis because he used to, McNamara and Khrushchev had a relationship, and he could understand the position that he was in and the show of force he needed to make.
Oh, that's
only
cool.
Reason why we're not all dead right now.
So, do people still have outstanding questions or challenges that you didn't talk about? Sorry, I missed the most important part. Did we talk about time and like how do you help people make decisions that are in the best interest of, you know, the company despite of what they've agreed to? No?
Maybe through the politics of the organization, because it's at the end, it's like at the end, I can put it under the culture of the organization. Organization is accept certain failure. People are more willing to have some window to adjust. But if people want to be shiny, bright every time, it's difficult to have somebody walk with you in the path where he doesn't see the end of the path. And that's where there's a risk averse. And that's for me, the political aspect. It's not political for organization, it's a human behavior when we are on a certain organization, either society or a company, but the ego / position / that's the challenge. Because once we remove that and we remove emotion, and it's easy because at the end it's black and white. It's optimum. You cannot go against that. But this layout of culture, that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think a few techniques that I've tried, but again, you're in a different environment, so what work is different. But I think for me, it's like trying to let people drink milk before I ask them to eat. It's like we can't ask them to make a massive decision that potentially has a lot of consequences, either positive or negative, before they've tried a little bit. It's like a new meal, right? Tried a little bit of the new meal, or saw it in action, or understood what it could taste like and what would happen if it didn't go to plan and things like that. I think the other thing is, like you allude to it, Kyle, it's like you need to empathize with their challenges, because it's not like I personally find that most people are actually willing to do the right thing. It's not about like willing, it's almost about more usually about their ability to do it. And it's like trying to empathize, and again, giving them a taste of something without a lot of consequences can start getting them to introduce that idea. I think the other thing as well that you said, Kyle, is like when you involve people early on and give them that information, exposure to the information, give them exposure to those interviews or those experiences that you're like finding shocking or different from what the system or the organization's talking about, that almost like it creates cognitive dissonance for them to not act according to the way that they think they should act, or not make the decisions that they so it becomes easier for them, personally at least, to know what it is that they need to do versus they're sheltered from those stories or those experiences. Yeah, if that makes sense. So I think you had the answer all along.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was actually just working with our data visualization team a couple of days ago, and their challenge was they came up with this brilliant way of building this star map of connecting all these audit results, and then they put it in front of people, and people just went, I hate this. I can't explain why, I just hate it. And they were really frustrated because they were like, this is so like 22nd century. Why do people not get it? And I kind of had to say, you have to walk people into some of this change. You can't just say, it's too smart for you, trust me. I think that's why a lot of the vaccine reluctancy is happening right now, especially since we've got RNA vaccines. They're not the traditional dead virus vaccines. And it's just saying, I'm not going to explain the science to you, just do it. Just bet your health on it. In this case, we're saying, I'm not going to explain to you how it works. Just bet your career on it and go with the results. And people are, I don't want that. So I think my recommendation was keep that on the back burner, but also give them the opportunity to do all of that stuff manually. it's no fun. That sucks. I just beat all that manual stuff. I know, but we're not there yet. You need the system needs to transition naturally.
That's amazing. I was reading an article about like the trust chain of vaccines and like the impact of rumors and stuff, and why you can't just tell people like, no, that rumor is incorrect, just trust the science, when the science is always changing. It's like a completely foreign concept for people that like they haven't had the time to get their head around it. I'll share the article on Slack, but yeah, I thought it was like super interesting. This lady who has like years and years of experience of trying to understand what it is that causes trust or mistrust in different vaccines.
Yeah, and it's what's fascinating is you can go back to any technological transition and look at like the TV is spying on us and it's going to brainwash us, and the radio was radiating and it was going to possess people, and when they put electricity in, it was going to electrocute everybody and burn everyone's houses down and destroy civilization as we know. Like every time that we've made any kind of tick forward, there's been a massive panic. You just have to allow for it.
Yeah.
Back then, I learned that a job that used to exist was pole saver. When telephones were first created and telephone lines had poles, a job was to sit in certain neighborhoods on the pole, because certain neighborhoods, they did not appreciate how ugly it made their neighborhood, and they would chop them down. So this was an official job of the telephone company to sit on a pole. I was like, wow. So
Yeah.
that is, and I think I saw this in relation to the 5G myth and stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. The ways that we work are like how we bring change about. You don't expect these sort of crazy rumors to come up, but they do when people believe them and then act on them. So understand that we're a bit over time, so I'll go quick. So some principles, and I think we spoke about this a lot last week, but focusing in on equality, not equity, not necessarily as a facilitator, not necessarily treating everyone the same, but giving everyone a chance to contribute equally, if that makes sense. Second one is creating the best environment for people to actually work together and come up with a shared, I don't want to say objective, but shared view of what it is that they need to do. And then the last thing is giving the group the power. Often as a facilitator, you've got the power and you almost have to like transfer that to the group and let them take action and guide course. That's not always up to you. So
Abram, did you mean equity, not equality, or was it equality, not equity?
Yeah, equity, not equality.
Okay.
Thanks.
In a moment, I was like, did I miss everything completely?
One session, we changed completely. We're like, nah, you know what? We were wrong last session.
I had somewhat of a doubt. I was like, damn, I must have been sleeping.
Remind me when we just started university, because I switched from something to accountability, accountant, and I don't understand what is accountant. I learned it by heart, and when the transaction starts, when you examine the accountant, here is the transaction. I right away, because I learned it by heart, I go directly and answer. But sometimes I missed, it's the reverse, and now it's bugging me, because at the end of the year, I thought that I understood accounting, but didn't work out because I didn't know the answer is like all the year one to the. I'll go back to what you said. As facilitator, the challenge is not a trust, because you see, all we discussed, if it was there is a trust, we will not have this challenge. It's the facilitator, the biggest challenge of the facilitator is trust, because if you have trust, the agenda will be clear. You don't have be silent. The power, you will not have an issue of the power. It's not a trust issue. Or about vaccines, it's trust. 5G, it's trust. At the end, it's trust.
Yeah, true. And I think the common strategy of telling people, just trust me, we've got scientists, like appealing to authority, is like, it's helpful for some, to be honest, but not for everyone. And it can't be your one and only strategy. Cool. Awesome. So this week's challenge is to actually facilitate an inclusive and productive conversation. So Dan, definitely keen to hear how that 5 words activity goes. And yeah, looking forward to hear from everyone how what techniques you actually applied to have an inclusive and productive conversation. Any final thoughts?
I put that video that I was talking about on Slack. Highly recommend. It's inspirational.
That's awesome. I'm definitely going to watch that this weekend.
Newfoundland.
Is that the one on?
I just posted it on Slack.
Okay.
Yeah, about how they designed a new ecosystem for this island because the commercial shipping or commercial fishing destroyed the economy. There was actually a program in Newfoundland where they were going to relocate everyone. And they said, absolutely not. This is our home. This is our culture. We just need to figure out a new livelihood now. And so this is how they went about it, reinventing themselves. It's amazing.
That's cool. I'm definitely going to watch that. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. It's so good to see you again and hearing from you. I'll let you know how we go with the presentation today and
Please.
next steps.
Good luck.
Okay.
Awesome.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Bye.